One day when my son was a senior in high school, I was sitting on the couch knitting a baby blanket, and he came walking in the door and he said, "Mother, do you know what? We have a highly dysfunctional family." Oh, my lands. That's exactly what I did that day, too. 30 years ago, I laughed my head off. I said, "So you're just finding this out now?" Anyway, I just thought that was so astounding. Thank you for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. This is about dysfunctional families. And you know what? Most all of us come from a dysfunctional family. Because as we talked about yesterday when we said, "Am I dysfunctional as a human being?" Most all of us are. We have areas in our lives where we don't shine as brightly as we might. We don't do as well as we could if we tried harder. We just honestly struggle with being a human. What do you know? And humans are dysfunctional. They do not function at their optimal, best, primary, amazing capacity. We just don't. All of us are dysfunctional in some ways. So you take three, four, five, six dysfunctional human beings and put them into a household together, and wow, what do you know? You have a dysfunctional family. This is how it goes. Um, People don't go directly to the person they're having problems with and talk it out. They go to their brother, they go to their mom, they go to someone else in the house and say, "Do you know what so and so said to me? Do you know what so and so did to me? And I'm so mad and I'm so upset." "Well, did you talk to your brother?" "Well, no." Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. That's dysfunctional. Go talk to the person who's on your nerves. "Well, I already did talk to him. I talked to him 20 times. I talked to him 50 times. I talked to him 100 times." Boy, don't we all understand how frustrating this is? Yes, yes, we do. And yet, we need to continue to attempt to communicate with that person. By the grace of God, maybe some of these days they're actually going to have a breakthrough. Even if they do tend to be highly resistant and they don't hear very well and they're kind of proud and they're pretty sure they're right most of the time, like, okay, all the time. There's another level of dysfunction. Um, but you have got to continue to work at functionality within the family unit and within subunits. So, child to child, child to parent, parent to child, parent to grandparent. I mean, we're just talking so many levels of dysfunction. It's crazy. All right, let's talk about the big ones here for a couple minutes. So you come from a really truly dysfunctional family where there's alcoholism, drug addiction, sexual addiction, pornographic addiction, pick your addiction because God knows there are plenty of them. Severe food disorders, people who don't relate to food appropriately. It's not for nourishment, but it's for a whole lot of other things, trying to fill something empty that's inside of you. People are abusive, people are neglectful, people are careless, uh, people are violent. Just there are just so many kinds of dysfunction. And tragically, they do tend to continue on through the generations. Generally, people who are abused grow up to be abusive. Tragically, I wish it weren't true, guys who watch their dads beat their moms and say, "I'm never going to act like that. My dad's a blankety blank, and that's never going to be me." More than 62% of the time, they're the very guys who grow up and beat their wives. Oh my goodness sakes. I'm sorry to tell you that dysfunction continues. You have to own up to the dysfunction in your family. So, if there is a lot of addiction in your family, if there is abuse and violence in your family, if there's incest in your family, whatever's there, you need to at least have the guts to stand there and say to yourself, "Man, my family of origin, those people are really dysfunctional. And if I grew up with them, probably somewhere in me is some of that same kind of dysfunction. And what in the world am I going to do about this? Because I don't want to pass this on to my kids." I've shared this with you before. When I was a young woman, I had a wicked-eyed temper. No joke. I grew up in my mom and daddy's house. Everyone yelled and screamed and cussed each other and slapped each other around, and my mom and dad beat the daylights out of each other. Yeah, what in the world did you think I was going to grow up and be like? And when my kids were like 2 and 3, that was it. I mean, seriously, it. I made that determination. This was not going to be my life. This was not how I was going to live. Now, I didn't stop that day, but I started that day changing a lot of things about my attitude, my perspective on life, the way that I did things, the reason why I did things, my motivation behind it. I got a hold of it. Now, I grant you, it probably took me a good 5 or 6 years to really, really, really get a hold of it. I don't know anybody on the face of God's earth today who would tell you that I am an abusive, nasty, angry, hate-filled human being. No one knows me that way now. That would be because I'm not that way now. I learned how to live differently. And I want you to understand, so can you. It's a fact. It's up to you. So if you don't look at the dysfunctionality of your family, probably you're not going to own up to the fact that it might be in you somewhat and that changes need to happen. So you've got to really take a good, hard look at it, including at yourself, and say, these are the ways in which my family is dysfunctional. And these are things I believe I got some of too. And this is what I've got to get a handle on. Because again, we just have two options. We can help our children do better, or we can go with the status quo just the way it's always been, and usually that means it's going to go further downhill. Those two choices are up to us as parents. So my challenge question for you today is, are you willing to look at the dysfunctionality of your family? Are you willing to look at your own dysfunction? And are you willing to do something about it? These are huge questions. Massive. As I talked about yesterday, am I a dysfunctional person? You have to kind of prioritize, because if you really had a horribly dysfunctional family, you're not going to fix everything in a day or a week or even a few years. You have to choose the one that matters to you the most. So say you frequently insult and cuss at and slap your kids, because that's what you grew up with and that's what you know, and it seems pretty normal to you, and you really understand this aggressive, angry, pushy way of being a parent is not effective. It's really actually having negative ramifications in your child's life. So you say, okay, this is my priority. I am going to learn to be kind. I'm going to learn how to state what I think emphatically and strongly, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I am not going to yell at my kids. I am not going to call my kids names. I'm not going to slap my kid. The next time I go to raise my hand, I'm going to get a hold of that. And I can even say out loud, man, I just feel like slapping you. But that's not helpful. It isn't who I want to be. So I'm not. And in time, what a great example you can be to your child and say, pretty much, I don't even feel like smacking you anymore. Remember, that's how we used to live? And we don't live that way anymore. And we're not going to live that way. Again, you're empowering your child to understand that change is a real possibility in the human existence. You can, in fact, learn to function at a higher level, a more productive level, a kinder, more compassionate, honestly, more fulfilling level. That's a great advantage to your child. Talk about helping your family become less dysfunctional. That is a huge opportunity for you to start to develop change in yourself and acknowledge it and say, you know how my mom and dad live. You know how my brother and his wife live. You know how your aunt so-and-so and her family live. We're not doing that anymore. It is totally appropriate to use the examples that you have at hand. Don't be disrespectful. Don't cause your children to despise those people. Just help them to develop a sense of the contrast. The way you were raised, the ways you were taught, the things that were modeled to you, and how you are taking time and expending energy to be different than that, so that your family is better. Your children will understand that. Not only will they understand it, they will appreciate it. I think if both of my sons were sitting here with me today, they could very readily address dysfunction in my family of origin. They could also tell you significant changes that they have seen in my lifetime in their 47 and 48 years of life. My son especially told me just a matter of weeks ago that one of the things that he appreciates about me the most is that I am still earnestly working on who I am as a human being and the manner in which I live, the way I relate to other people, my commitment level to being good to other people and showing them respect. I can honestly tell you, that's probably one of the greatest compliments that I have ever received in my life. And I am thankful that my sons have seen that and know that about me. So for you, Do you have a dysfunctional family? I have news for you. You definitely do. In some way or another, there is dysfunction in your home. It isn't do you have it, it's what are you doing about it? Don't be afraid to let your kids know. I really hope that you do better than I when you grow up. I've told my kids that my entire life, and I still tell it to them because I mean it. I always say, I hope you're a good 10 or 15 years ahead of me in learning and developing things because you've had the opportunity of both my example and my illustrations of how to do it. So don't be afraid and don't be ashamed. Own up to the places that you are not doing great and discuss the places that you're working on and develop in your kids a willingness and an understanding of what it means to become more and more fully functional as a productive, healthy, responsible, happy, successful human being. I really hope this was a good one for you today. I always think it's a fascinating subject to discuss dysfunction with people. For some people, that word's very offensive. I am not dysfunctional. I do not have a dysfunctional family. Okay, so if I offended you, write me a nasty gram. I don't mind. But I really hope this has been a lot of help for you. Thank you for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.